Hey Pussynet, new little video. Yes, I know I was just here, but I thought you guys missed me so much, so I came back. No, I got really into the course that I was taking to a point that I finished it. It was a lot of videos to watch, but it was very interesting. And it brought a lot of questions, and I thought that this video won't be so much about learning as bringing a discussion, hopefully. Um, I know I don't have that many viewers usually, but hopefully this one will bring some people to discuss about, because I think it's an interesting thing. I know for me it will change some of my preparation. Um, and I mean, I try to stay current on YouTube, like follow a bunch of people, and even if a lot of time I don't agree with a lot of their concepts and stuff, and if they keep me on their channel, been kicked from a few of them, but when you say the truth, sometimes a lot of people don't like to hear that. Anyway, um, yeah, so it's not a topic I never heard. I heard about people talk about infectious disease, like the ones that most likely would come and everything. But this one is a little bit different, and that's why in the title it's kind of this strange, the terrorist within, is because um, we, as preppers, we or whatever you want to call yourself, or as people that foresee disaster. There you go. We get ready to dark stuff, because to be prepared, you have to go kind of on dark question so that you can know what to prepare. I mean, part of my job too is like this. It's always about expect the worst, hope for the best. But you have to go in dark places to know about that. And then after I finished that course, all the time I had kind of a lot of questions and stuff. And when I see a lot of videos on preparation, like safety, as the weapons and the guns and the bullets and stuff. One that I don't see much, and like I said, I try to stay current, but one that I see is like what would be the emergent disease that comes out, but it's always about human. So the protection about against human, about the hordes of other human, the unprepared humans and stuff. But it seems like, or the terrorists themselves, or whatever. But it seems like we forget about an enemy that's been there for longer than we are, and that's been fighting us, and has been very good at fighting us, and actually is getting even better now to fight us. And a lot of the disease that we used to win is always find its way, and it's infectious. It's disease, and mostly infectious disease. That they are caused by bacteria, viral, worm, whatever. They come in different flavors. They come with different weapons, and they're very good at what they do. And that's why I call them a little bit terrorists, because as much as we try, so what seems like the question never been asked, I find, I don't know, maybe it's been and I didn't see that video, but we always ask ourselves, how can we prepare for the environment that we're going to live in? But we never question ourselves, how is the environment going to be prepared for us? As we're by any disaster, for this discussion, let's imagine that it's not even a pandemic, which I most likely think that, like I was saying yesterday, beside man-made disease, man-made disaster, the second one that could probably be on the highest on my list would be a pandemic. The more the when than the if. But let's say we're talking about a disaster. So let's say we're talking about things. Well, Haiti is a good example of that. Right after the earthquake, they had a increase case of cholera, like bad case of cholera. And so basically the earthquake created a situation where basically infectious disease went up and rampant. And I'm not part of any groups. I'm not. I don't have like a bunker somewhere that I've lived for a year and two and stuff. But I like um, the discussion that a lot of people do, because a lot of time they discuss about that, and it's an interesting topic to kind of imagine. I don't the chance of this happening in my mind is very low, but if it would happen, which I find interesting, is that not a lot of people seems to talk about, like I was saying, how would the environment try to survive from us, from what happens. And what I mean by that is that the rules if you look at, for example, the case of Ebola right now, animals are usually the ones that have the reservoir. So 70, I think in the course they were saying 70% of the disease that gets emergent, so basically that comes to the humans, comes from the animals, and they stay there as reservoir. So, for example, SARS was from a bird in Hong Kong, end up transmitted to humans. Human recreated a different type, or finally was able to. There was a mutation that it could go from the human to other humans, and then next thing you know, we have a SARS crisis on our hands. And so usually that's what happens. Well, if you talk about disaster, disaster X, a lot of people, for example, were talking about eating squirrels if you had to, because you don't have enough money and you don't have enough food or anything, do anything to survive. And so that means that we would be pushed to do things that we usually not do. Therefore, we'd be in contact with animals or insects or anything that we are not used to. Therefore, increasing our chance as a group, not just as us, but as a group, to introduce some of those things that are in the reservoir that usually don't happen. And so the call that, I forgot the name, but there's a name for that. The Swiss cheese um, safety is basically each. Imagine that between an event that you never wanted to happen, between you and the event that you never want to happen, each layer of safety that you put has some safety, but also has failures into it, and those failures are the holes of the Swiss cheese. Well, for A to B, all those holes has to be in place. So that's for if you put a lot of safety in between, less chance that all those holes will get in together so that the events happens. Well, now if you break up a disaster that creates like a maverick, as a lot of population moving, a lot of change in the behaviors, we don't wonder so much about how the environment responds to ourselves. For example, good example of that could be that a lot of coyotes now in places like Calgary live in big cities because as the city grow, they were able to they push out the big predators, so like the wolf and everything, either by hunting or by pushing the animals out. And so smaller animals like coyotes that can thrive on smaller things like um, cats or dogs or squirrels or any smaller mammals, they'll be able to thrive in those places. But by living in proximity as well as in city, they have developed way more disease that they can carry. Well, now imagine that you have like all those coyotes living in the city, and there's a big earthquake, for example, or whatever that would displace. So disaster X again happen, and all those coyotes now goes back into the wild. If they don't even survive in the wild, because now suddenly they become the smaller prey for the bigger ones, so like the wolf, now they're taking over. Well, now the wolf are eating the coyotes, or they get in contact with the coyotes. Now the disease can transmit from the coyotes back to the wolf, and now you bring that back into the community. So as you can see, the environment also would modify. And so why is it important? Is that because we would become more dependent on certain food like this, or a lot of people is like, oh, we'll grow my own crop and my own animals and all that. Well, there was a crisis in the UK mentioned in the course. I forgot when it was, but there's a sheep that was brought from another farm to one of their farm, and got a disease again because you move from A to B, and it spread out like crazy, and they had to kill something like 100,000 um, animals because the had that disease. And so now you're talking that small communities, like there was even on the discussion that was having, well, hearing about on YouTube that some some communities to prevent people from the city to come towards their smaller village or smaller town would literally blow up a bridge or let a lot of water and everything. Well, that changed the environment. By changing that environment, the animals also will have to change. The insects will do difference. If you, for example, if you flood a plain so that you prevent people to do, well, now that's water all over the place. Well, what water breeds more mosquitoes. More mosquito means that there are more case of West Nile that could happen. There is more bloodborne, I think. And so the reason for my video about all those examples that I bring, like I said, it's more questions than anything. This is to become the questions. As we prepare so much about with weapons, about human against human, basically riots and looters and all this, what are we doing to prevent ourselves from those smaller threats that are bacteria, virus, and all this? And it's not just about the pandemic, but also those other reactions. Because if we know, for example, just before the disaster is a pandemic themselves, so if there's an H1N1 going in, as we're going to retreat or whatever, we bug out or bug in or whatever your plan is, you're going to go in there with your mindset that there's this infectious disease X out there and I need to protect myself against. But the ones that we don't think about is that now that there's a disease, for example, the cholera that increased, or now you have more cadavers in the water near that river that you would think about taking your supplies. So now you have case of cholera or Ebola or whatever else that could survive in that water, like Pseudomonas, and now you have injuries that could survive with this. So what does those communities, if you're in one of those communities, what kind of have record, how would you do, because CDC, let's say, is down. So let's say we imagine a major disaster, like a lot of people like to do, the the doom days that have happened and everything. What would you have in your smaller communities or inside yourself to monitor it? How would you put that in place? What would you do, like, to replace the CDC jobs of basically tracking down all those pandemics and those zoonotic disease that comes and tracking down what's going on and what, because maybe in town B, just living beside your A, has a pandemic going on of whatever in their crop, and basically the wind is bringing down on yours. So how would you monitor that? What do you have in place for that? How would you how would you keep track of this? Like, if somebody just had the sniffle one day, do you put everybody in quarantine that went with it? How would you track down who was in contact with them when the communities are way smaller and everybody have to participate in everything? Do you put some people aside? Do you have and would you like put people aside, meaning like, is there people that never gets in contact with certain people, so that way you make sure that not the whole community is so what plan of contingency for post disaster? So not the disaster is an infectious disease, but post disaster, how would you monitor to make sure that disease doesn't become another disaster inside the disaster? Anyway, I would like you to have comments and leave that inside. Hopefully I'll trigger some people and shake some ideas, because it would be an interesting know, because I know for me, I will start sitting down and ask myself some of those questions and stuff. Anyway, talk to you soon.